Welcome to Coaching in Session,
where limits end and growth begins.
Hosted by Michael Rearden.
This is your space to challenge the ordinary,
Unlock your potential,
and step boldly into your next chapter.
Your mindset journey continues.
Welcome, Eric G, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm ready to go.
We are here and we mean business because we're going to be talking about your work. You are a life coach and an author, but what you do is so much more rich. It is the idea of what makes a person tick, the identity of a person in the sense of what they can be or who they are becoming. And if we could, can you tell us a little bit of your history, a little bit of your becoming, and then, of course, tell the world how you help people?
Yeah, I always say it started with me being or feeling like I was a weirdo, in school. And I know people say that maybe in a good way now, but growing up in the 90s, it wasn't always like that. You basically I figured out that, there was maybe something wrong with me until I started learning about personality types. And then I was like, different people might have different values and different goals. And yet we're told to be a certain way. And that's kind of what screws us up, right? So studying about personality types, I did that for quite a bit throughout my high school life and then throughout college. And I was able to use those studies to start my own education company. And, we worked with about 1,000 students a year. And working with 1,000 students a year, I was able to teach my teachers a new kind of personality typing methodology so that they would teach their kids in a way that wasn't necessarily biased by their own personality type, but adjusted to what their kid's personality type was. Because I think that's the best way we can grow, is we can grow into the best version of ourselves as opposed to trying to be the best version of what someone else wants us to be.
Okay, well, I have two big questions, and we're going to answer both, but I'm going to allow you to answer them in the order that you see to be fit. Number one, I want to look at the personality methodology that you have. And then number two, you said something about how society in general will tell us how to be a certain way. And the question would have been, why are we living in a world that society or people are telling people how to live when everyone is so individualized? So I'm going to allow you to answer it in any order you see that will make the most sense.
Well, it'll make the most sense to me, but my brain doesn't always work in that way. I would probably say, my personality typing methodology breaks people into four, I call them personality packs, because within those four personality packs, there are four personality types, and I use animals to symbolize those types. So 4 times 4 equals 16 different animal types. And I mentioned the packs first because each pack has a different core value. And the major pack, and they make about half the population's core value, is safety and security. Like, they're very cautious. They believe in tradition because tradition is safe because, of course, if we've done it before, then it should work again. That is generally their mindset. So I use that as an explanation of why I think we're told to be a certain way, is because half the population approximately have the same value. And the problem with that is that when you make up half the population, more than likely you're going to see other people who share your value, and you'll be like, yes, that's the way we should be, because that person's like that and that person's like that. Okay, that person isn't like that, but they're kind of in the minority. So, really we're right? And especially when your value is like safety and security, because they want a certain kind of, for lack of a better word, certainty. And I think when you want to know, like, okay, this is how the way it is, and this is the way how it isn't, then I think you're told to be that way. And it's reinforced throughout school, throughout college, throughout work, throughout your family life. And thus it just kind of pervades, when in fact, half the population isn't like that. And I think you definitely see that working with kids because, we worked with public schools. You're getting the same, you're getting a broad spectrum, of the population. And you definitely see that when working with.
So when we're looking at these different packs, right, that we could say half are going to be all about safety and security. And most baby boomers are going to definitely be part of that conversation, I think, because they were just in a different mindset, a different generation. But the kids that are coming up today, they're a bunch, or they had a saying in 2000s, 2010s, or maybe even 2020s. I forget when the word came up, but it's called YOLO. You only live once. And they started to throw caution to the wind. And they started to do all of these things that their grandparents or their parents would not even think about doing. And so they're living in a different mindset or in a different generation or a different world than what we may have grown up in. And so when we look at those mindsets and according to those packs, do you think it is going to be beneficial for them to adjust to a generation or for them to adjust to what society is saying as a whole?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, right? Because I found that, the personality typing percentages are the same, but you're right. Like in certain generations, or I'd say certain decades, maybe another pack's kind of values pervade, almost like as if it's almost a reaction or a response. And I have this, I didn't write about this in my book, The Power of Personality, but it is like a theory that I've been thinking about, which is, like let's say starting with the 50s decade, you can see it was a lot about safety, security, white picket fence, very, for lack of a better word, conservative. But then the 60s was a decade of great turmoil. So that kind of fits into what I call the shaman personality pack. And they only make up about 8% of the population, and they're all about self-knowledge, discovering yourself. So when you think of like the hippie movement, that value system tend to pervade in the 60s, almost as in a response to things being too traditional, right? And then in the 70s came, and the 70s was a lot more like Epicurean, like a lot more hedonistic, just have fun and just do what you want. And that's kind of more of the hunter mentality. The hunter is one of the packs that values visceral excitement, like getting the most out of the world, kind of like YOLO, right? So I do think like there are cycles. And then like the 80s came back, and that's like the gather, or we call them the gather. Sorry, I'm throwing a lot of terms out there. But the gatherer pack is the one that values safety and security. So it's almost like the gatherers came back in the 80s. They're like, no, this is too crazy. We got to like add more tradition and more structure. And then it just keeps cycling over and over and over again. The 90s came up, and that was like a lot of progress, but also turmoil. And then, so anyway, that was a long way historically of me saying, like, I do agree that I think different decades have this kind of energy that kind of fits one pack over the other. And really, depending on whatever your pack is, you got to find your place within that and not stray too far away from who you are, no matter what the outward energy is. Because, sometimes it's not good for a gatherer to be YOLO. It's good for them to be cautious most of the time, because that's just their mindset. I always tell my teachers, like, if you get a gatherer student, safety and security is their big thing. They live in a bubble, and they're always going to live in a bubble. And if you try to like give them too much at any given time, you're going to pop that bubble, and it's not going to be good for them. But what you can do is expand the bubble. And, when you get a really expansive bubble, that's great, because that's a huge entire world. And in that huge entire world, it feels safe and secure. And I think that's a good thing.
Perfect. I love the way you presented that, because when we use absolutes like always or never, it becomes difficult to say, wait, like, can they never get out of the bubble? But the idea of a bubble expanding, meaning that they're not going to be in a finite situation, is so powerful, because I know many people are thinking maybe, okay, which personality type am I? And of course, the power of personality, they can look at all the different types of personalities that they could be. Today is more of a conversation of understanding how these personalities are being formed. Is it because of the times that we're living in? Is it because of how parents are interacting with children? Is it because of technology? And all of these things are probably going to be definitely in parents' minds, but then maybe in people who are trying to identify who they are today, because there's a lot of confusion in our world today or between identity. They have a hard time understanding who they are. So if they don't even know who they are, how can they associate a personality with an identity that they can't even identify?
Right. And I always say, like, a lot of people ask me, can you change your identity, or can you change your personality? Because people always want to be the better personality type. I'm like, there are no good or bad personality types. Now, there are good and bad people, and you can be a great version of your personality type, or you can be a terrible version of your personality type. Because I always like to say, our strengths come from our weaknesses and vice versa, right? So for every person's responsible, structured, organized person, you're also going to have like a flip side to that, which is like rigid, fascist, bossy, like not flexible, So I think that mirrors, those strengths and weaknesses mirror each other. And I think the whole point is accepting them and not trying to be like something else because we don't like ourselves. You can be a better version of yourself. You might not like yourself now, but a lot of those things that you think make you weak will eventually make you strong.
Yeah, very true. You mentioned that you work with over 1,000 children or just people every single year. And I wanted to look at your perceptions for this year, because I know every year, typically businesses grow. We become more ambitious as business owners, and we say we want to help more people. And I wanted to look at, not only the 1,000, but maybe the 2,000 or 5,000 of people that you'll be working with. Do you see that there is a trend in more people looking to find who they are or their personality types?
Yes, and I think that's a good thing because I think when you have the luxury of being able to, let's face it, like we're in a pretty good spot now, in America, like, and I know sometimes people don't feel that way, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but nothing's perfect, but I think at the end of the day, we have to realize we do have a lot of advantages. Like if you're in a third world country, most people aren't thinking, gosh, I wonder if I can like reach my full potential. They're more thinking like, dang, can I like get something to eat today? And I think that's great. I think it's good that we have that luxury to be able to like figure out what we truly want, which is why I always tell, my students like, look, like, yeah, maybe your parents or your grandparents make great sacrifices to get you over here and to like put you in this position. And it's almost an insult to them not to take advantage of that luxury. Even if your grandparents are telling you like, no, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be whatever, like a software engineer, like you got to take advantage of that freedom you have to figure out what makes you happy. And I'm definitely seeing that more, like that's a bigger thing. I think people are really more interested in discovering what truly makes them happy. Now, whether they're on the right track to doing that, there's a lot of different, I think, wrong ways, because I think a lot of times when people are coaching people, they'll tell them, no, this is the right way to go because it worked for me. And I don't necessarily know if that's the best that works for them. And so I do think there's a bit of an adjustment that needs to be made.
Yeah, very true. I know even my coaching, I give people paths. I'm like, listen, it's this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, right? These are possible outcomes if you go this path. And just to give them that knowledge, they can have a little bit of foresight to say, okay, I'm ready for this. For example, like when you sign up for the gym, right? Like New Year's, everyone is going to the gym. Like I went to the gym, it was yesterday. I think it was yesterday or the day before. The gym was packed. And I'm just thinking in my head, oh, I remember, the New Year's resolution wave of people are still around. And it's just so funny how they change so quickly. Would you say that their choice for change or this idea for betterment, be it temporary or permanent for the year, is just a decision that they make on the whim, or maybe them not following through has something to say about their personality?
Yeah, I think sometimes when we I think obviously change or wanting to change is a good thing. I just said that I don't believe that we really change, but I always say we don't change, we grow, and I think that's really cool. Like, so in order to grow into the best version of ourselves, I think we need to we got to match our desire for change with something that's going to work for us, right? Because, I had a friend who, he was a CPA, so a certified public accountant for a long time. And I was telling him like, you should, it's fun because I had owned my own business. I was like, it's great owning your business because you can wake up whenever you want to, as opposed to waking up. I think he woke up at like 6 a.m. or something to have to like do the drive to work. And he was like, oh, that's so awesome. But, he liked that. He liked waking up. He was a very structured person. So even when he ended up quitting his job and actually starting his own business, he still woke up at 6 a.m. But it's just to go to the gym. So he woke up, went to the gym, did a bike ride, and then started work at like 9:30 or 10. And so I do think it's good. Like, it's good to know yourself, because I think it's okay to be comfortable in what you do right, because that's the best way to improve and be better.
The next I want to, and it's kind of off a play of your title, The Power of Personality, but is there a power into someone figuring out their personality, saying, for example, maybe I'm a hunter or I'm a gatherer, like me knowing who I am? I know some people, they put themselves in zodiacs, right? They look at star signs. I'm a Taurus, so I'm stubborn, or I'm a Pisces and I'm feisty, or whatever it be. Do you find that there is a power in people knowing their personalities?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it's probably one of the greatest powers you can have. And I'm a little biased, but because it's one of those things they don't teach you in school, right? They teach you like, what does this word mean? What is a preposition, and how do you, like, what's 5 times 2? But they don't teach you like, who are you? Because they just, maybe they don't have the capabilities to. And I think, yeah, there's a great power in that, because, like, to figure out what is your greatest, or not your strength, because and that's another thing. People want to like figure out their personality type because they want to know what they're good at. And I'm always like, well, it's not going to tell you what you're good at. It's going to tell you what you probably like to do. But the thing is, the more we like to do things, the more often that we do it. And, when we do it right, then we'll get better at it. I always think of like Tim Duncan. I know you're in Texas, even though you might not necessarily be a Tim Duncan fan. I particularly do not like the Spurs because I'm a Laker fan. But, Tim Duncan didn't start playing basketball until I think his freshman year in high school. I think, or I forget, like he started really late. And I feel like that's what happens. It's almost like the same thing with personality. You might not be, it's never too late because you might not necessarily know your personality, but the moment like you find it out, something will just click. And I think for obviously Tim Duncan became a Hall of Fame basketball player, so something was right. I forgot I think he did swimming originally because, he came from the Virgin Islands. And then someone said, hey, you're pretty tall. Maybe you should start playing basketball. And he did it. And obviously we know what happened. So I think same thing with personality. Figure it out is a great power.
Yeah, I think of people who they have all of this potential, and power and potential I'm just going to use as synonyms for a minute, where they don't truly realize it. They let it sit by the waysides. Not saying that you can't be a 9 to 5 worker. I'm not saying this, but some minds are so great that you can do so much more than going to work 9 to 5 and then coming home exhausted. Because what happens in that area of creativity from 5 to 7, they waste it on their phones or in front of a TV or a screen. And as much as this hurts me, I understand why they do it. Is because they're just trying to get a reprieve from all the stress that they have been dealing with for the past 8 hours. And in our world, especially in schools, they teach you how to be consumers. They teach you how to want things. So you want the house, you want, these cars, and maybe it's beyond your means right now. And maybe you develop a lifestyle where you can afford those luxuries. But then even people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, they are still struggling. They're living paycheck to paycheck because they elevate their lifestyle to a certain degree. So they say, 75,000 or around that mark is where happiness ends in money. And so now it's a choice. It's like, okay, I want to have this type of car. I want to have this type of home. I want to have these types of entourages. So you have different types of friends. You have people who go out to these very nice restaurants, maybe, versus going to a small mom and pop shop that, is going to cost you a fraction of the cost. And so we have these different mindsets and these different personalities that are going to be developing, especially from watching all of these sitcoms and drama TVs. I think of Keeping Up with the Kardashians or something along those lines as the status quo for someone to say, I have to have this, I have to do this, I have to look a certain way. So everything is being presented to an individual on a silver platter of what the ideal life is versus someone developing the ideal life. And I know you talked about how parents might say, oh, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer. And what happens there is either they do it or they resent their parents for making them do something along those lines. And rightfully so, right? Because parents want the best for their children. But then at the same time, it's like, we don't necessarily know what they want to do because we're just instilling our own views of the world or desires onto them. And one of the things I do as a parent, I'm gonna pass it to you, is I have no idea what my kids are going to do. I know their personalities quite well. I'm looking at my son. He's only 3. I'm looking at my son. I say, he could maybe be into sports, maybe be an engineer, maybe a day trader, something along those lines. He likes art. Maybe he's an artist. So I'm just thinking about all the things that he could be. I'm not saying you're going to be this. My daughter, she's 1. And I'm like, well, she has all the characteristics to be like the next diva, the next pop star. Think of Taylor Swift. She has all of these things. She can be the next gymnast, Olympic gold medalist if she wants to be. So those are the things I see in them. It doesn't mean I'm going to force them. Of course, I'm going to give them avenues. I'm going to take them to football practices and ballet lessons. And I'm going to do all of these things for them. And I'm going to allow them to figure out their own path. But when you're nurturing these 1,000+ children that you're working with, or kids that you're working with, or just clients that you're working with every single year, do you find that there's a way to do it where like they're going to be those gold medalists down the road? Like you just know it, like this is going to get you to where you need to be tomorrow.
Yeah, I have a very unusual kind of coaching style, right? People will hire me, oftentimes they just want their kids to have great grades, right? To do well in school. And I tell them before they hire me, I'm like, you know what I'm going to tell your kids? I'm going to tell your kids that school is not necessarily important. I'm going to tell them that learning is important. And I'm also going to push them in a way that they might not have been pushed before, because I'm going to teach them, like, you can do whatever. You don't have to do the things people are telling you to do, but you do have to do one thing or two things. You have to find something that you love, or maybe multiple things that you really genuinely love, and you have to work your ass off at that. And generally when parents hear that, they're like, okay, that sounds great to me, And I think that's what it is. It's that work. You just don't want someone to be, for lack of a better term, lazy. And I think people can get, I won't say lazy, but people can get a little dispassionate if they don't like the things that they're doing. Yeah, and working with kids, I had a student who said, I want to be a veterinarian. I was like, you're not going to be a veterinarian. And she's like, why would you say that? And I'm like, because you don't like school. She's, by the way, was 10 at the time. I told her this, 11. Now she's older. And she was like, wait, veterinarians have to go to a lot of school? I'm like, well, let's count the years. Now, of course, she was like in junior high. So I'm like, okay, you're going to have 3 more years of this, then 4 years of high school, and then 4 years of college, and then 3 years of vet school, And she's like, oh my gosh. Like and of course I know. I'm like, I bet you what you did is you told your mom that you like dogs. And she was like, vet. And she's like, that's exactly, I told my grandmother that. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you don't even like cats. And she's like, wait, would I have to work on cats too? I'm like, yes, you probably have to work on cats too if you're a vet. But now it's great because, like really the next day she was like, you're right. I don't think I want to be a vet. I'm like, that's perfect. Because the next question she said, what do you think based on my personality, who I am, that I should pursue? And of course, I was like you. I was like, I don't want to prescribe one thing. So you got to go this way. It's more like, well, you're going to be good at this. Like, these seem to be your strengths. You're really good with people. You're a natural leader. You don't mind getting in front of people. You have oftentimes you have a purpose in what you do, and that's what drives you. So, I said maybe politics or something along those lines, or maybe a nonprofit or something that you believe in that you can rally people around. Community organizer, things of that nature. I was just throwing jobs, but multiple ones, right? Like kind of like how you're mentioning your kids, you're like, let's say your daughter, like you probably see, if you say diva, you probably see a lot of performative aspects with her. She probably moves around a lot, is very action oriented, would be my guess, maybe likes to dance and stuff. I see the same thing with my niece. I have a niece who's like about 13 months old. And I told my brother, I'm like, she's not going to be a very good student. I'm just telling you, she's not going to be a great student. Just be warned of that, because she's constantly like hitting things, banging things, wanting to grab things and moving around and can't stand still. And obviously in traditional school, that is a bad student, right? But, but people like that take care of themselves, right? They want to do things. So the moment they get out of school and they get into life, they're just like, okay, I'm going to try things and grab things. And that's how I learn. I learn through actual failure. And I think that is a good thing. Unfortunately, a lot of times, and I'm definitely finding that now, where failure, even like in professional sports, like failure is one of those things that people are afraid of now. Like boxers don't want to go for the L, right? They want to try to stay undefeated, because like Floyd Mayweather or something, or like they don't. But then they forget like Ali lost like 4 or 5 times, or Sugar Ray Robinson lost like 30 times, and they're considered the greatest. Like I think we have this thing where we're so afraid of failure now that where kids are taught, like, don't fail, just do as well as you can. And if you lose, you have to go for the championship all the time. Like, no, it's okay to lose. That's how we learn. And that's kind of what I was teaching my teachers as well, to teach their students.
My kids are in Montessori right now. So it's a very different schooling style than the public schools. I was a public school teacher for several years, and I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I said, no need for that to be in this household. So easy enough, I said, it's going to be exactly how I want them to get their education, because I know the negativities of what the public school is. And if we just look at public school, right, it's 10 months they're in school, and they can literally learn the curriculum within 3 to 6 months, depending on the child, right? Some are going to have an attention span like, hey, I'm super focused, I can get a lot done. And some are going to have like, you have to take more breaks. You have to go out and play more. So that's why I give the 3 to 6 month span for teaching someone the curriculum for the year. That leaves 4 months for someone to waste time, basically line up, fire drills, sit in the corner, right? Mm-hmm. Teacher berating them. So it's a lot of negativities there. And I want to bring up something that made me remember what my father had told me, because I think parents, they always instill something into, their children to an extent. It might not be like you need to have a job, but there's like little quotes and sayings that they might have. For example, money might not grow on trees. They might say something along those lines. And now you might be this personality type of super cautious. You're like, oh man, money doesn't grow on trees. Let me, start pinching my pennies. And I remember my father, he said this, and I don't even think he knows he says this. He said, handle your business. And I really like brought that to my attention, like, or my mind is like, handle your business, like so vague. It's extremely vague. I'm like, what am I handling? It's like, it's your business. So whether you're a business owner, doesn't matter. If you have a problem with someone, it's your business. So it was just like everything. And so I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to give that to my kids. But then I said, I want to give them something else for the world that we're living in, because that quote is great for me and it might be for them. But then I said, what world are they living in today? And so I came up with two things I'm going to say, and they're both different for my son and my daughter. My son, I'm going to say, love what you fight for. And for my daughter, I'm going to say, fight for what you love. And it's a different mindset if you really dissect it. I think I talked about it on a podcast episode, but the idea is that there's so much talk of gender equality, and how men and women are the same or different. And it's just so much confusion. And that right there, this quote that I say it literally is going to answer all of the questions for all these people who don't know the difference between a man or a woman or something along those lines. It's like that it's a different world. And so it has to be a different quote. And I think of how a personality can be, as you said, it can shift from, every decade or so, where maybe I'm looking at my parents for being secure, YOLO type of parents. And I say, well, I don't want that. And I see that more than the alternative of a kid saying, I want to, I want to be just like my father. I want to be just like my mother. There's a more of a differentiation between the generations, or the parent and the child. And what I wanted to ask is, when someone opens up your book and they're reading The Power of Personality, what's one of the first things that you think, or one of the first things that maybe you would like them to learn?
That's a great question. I have in the foreword, it's my favorite thing actually in the book was the foreword, which is weird because it's just like the little intro. And I have like a certain amount of like things to remember, like 7 like key things to remember. But like I say it in a funnier way, because the book is me. Because like we mentioned before, like I'm not a huge fan of like absolutes and certainties. And the same thing here. I feel like life should be fun. And especially learning about yourself, and the people around you, that also should be fun, right? So I guess in that way, overall, what I would want people to learn, the first thing, or at least to have in their mind, is that this is meant to be an ongoing, not struggle, but an ongoing journey of discovering more and more about the people that you love, including yourself. So it's okay to change. Like you might think, oh, this person is a stag personality type. And then maybe a year later, they're like, oh, you know what? Like they've actually opened up to me a little more, and I've discovered, that's not exactly what they are. They're more like this type, and that's okay. You don't have to be like compartmentalizing. Like in the moment you meet someone, okay, this person is this, and they're never going to be anything different in my mind. And I think that's probably the number one thing I would say. And I would say that I love that you change you're saying different things to your kids, because I do believe like different personalities need to hear certain different things too, and they are very different. The one, like, what is it? Love what you fight for.
Yeah. It's love what you fight for, and then fight for what you love.
Yeah, like, love what you fight for is something that I probably would tell actually like a gatherer child, because they're taught so much. Like gatherers, their number one of the things they really value in themselves is like a toughness. And that's great. It's great to be tough and resilient. How it manifests itself in maybe not the most healthiest of ways is if they're doing something they don't like, they're actually very good at doing the things that they don't want to do, right? Because in their mind, like, I'm gonna do the dishes, I'm gonna take out the trash, like that's my duty. And that's great, by the way. Like, I'm not saying that you want a whole generation of kids who don't want to do the dishes, but sometimes that translates into, okay, my job is not, I don't love my job, but I got to do it, without thinking, do you have to do it? Like, I get it, you have like a family that you have to take care of and stuff, but sometimes we don't, and this new generation, people are having less kids, and they're definitely having them later in life. Maybe you can take the time to figure out what you, like you said, loving what you're fighting for, because sometimes you might just be fighting just to fight, and a lot of my clients are like, I have the young clients, but it's great because I also have older clients, and they're like in their early 40s generally. And it's the typical midlife crisis where they're like, I've had this job for 20 years and I hate it. Like, what am I doing? What should I pivot to? Can you help me pivot? And so then obviously I bring up the personality typing to help them figure out what do you really truly love doing? And maybe that'll help you figure out maybe the career path you want to take now. Yeah. So, and then for your daughter saying the love what you fight for, or no, fight for what you love. Fight for what you love. That's what I would tell Hunter, because hunters definitely love lots of things, but sometimes they don't always follow through. They're always just like, yeah, but sometimes I just want to have fun, and or this is a little harder, maybe, like, because they love like feeling good. You know, they love massages, they love stuff like that, and sometimes you just have to buckle down and just, you know, you got to fight for it. You know, you might not get it right away. You might not be the best singer right away. You might not be the best athlete right away. You know, Michael Jordan got cut from his high school team. You know, that's okay. You know, like clearly it worked out for him in the end. You just got to buckle down and do it. So I love the difference in the advice.
Yeah, adversity is going to be definitely the dream killer. Fear even is one of the bigger ones that is going to stop people from doing maybe the best things in their life possible. I think of, if you ever see pictures, or if you're planning on going on vacation or somewhere, let's say you're going to the Bahamas or Caribbean islands, and you start to see all of these different islands, all these different excursions. You're like, whoa, this place is so beautiful. And it's so surreal sometimes when you go to these places, you just see blue skies, and you're just like, whoa, it's paradise. And then we come into our city homes and we just see concrete, and we see just a life that's a little bit more dull. And I remember when I think I was 28, when I really put this into full perspective. I mean, when I was in my early 20s, I was starting to see it. I was doing a lot of hiking, and I was enjoying getting away from all the city life. But when I was 28, I could really see the difference between people. I can see the differences between cities and just states from where you were living in, because I had given myself so much opportunity, and I have given myself so many experiences. You probably know this. Most people, they stay within, 15 to 25 miles from where they were born, and they stay in the same state, the same city or around there for the whole entire life. They are born there and they die there. Yet there's a whole world out there of opportunities, of things to look at. You go to Switzerland and you see all these beautiful hills and mountains. You go to New Zealand and see all these different types of landscapes. You can go to Egypt, you can see these huge pyramids. So there's just so much that is out there, yet so many people, they live in that bubble. And I know we talked about how bubbles can expand, but do you think there's a way for people to get out of that bubble of their city or their state or their place of birth, and to say that this is not my jail cell, today I'm going to liberate myself?
Yeah, and I know I totally 100% agree. And it sounds like I'm picking on gatherers, but that's such a gather mentality, right? Like stay with what's safe. But as you mentioned, you can expand that bubble. I remember, when I had my education company, we would have trainings every year, and every year training, like, obviously I would provide the food, and I'd always want to do something different, like, because, that's kind of my personality. Maybe I'm like, oh, I'm going to do different food today. And I remember doing, like, I hate to say Middle Eastern because that's so generic, but it was probably closest to Lebanese food. So we ate in Lebanese food. And one of the dishes was falafel, even though I know falafel is Egyptian, but whatever, falafel. And a gatherer teacher of mine, this is a teacher, so she's teaching kids, right? She walks up, she's like, what's that? I'm like, oh, it's falafel. She's like, what's that? Well, that's falafel. And clearly she hadn't had it before. I'm like, oh, it's, they take like chickpeas, and which is basically like a bean, and then they mash it up and deep fry it. And she stood there, and this is like a procession line of people getting their food, right? She's like, let me think about this. And then her friend who was right behind her was like, oh, that sounds great. And she took 3 and put it on her plate. And so then the initial friend was like, okay. So that convinced her to take 1. Okay, now 3 years have gone by. And so I went to the same restaurant again for training, and someone does the same thing, different person. It's like, what is that? And I do the whole explanation. And then the person behind her ended up being that first person, right? And she's like, oh, you're going to love it. It's fantastic. And so then that's the key, is that her bubble had expanded. Mainly it helped that her friend. So I think was my long way of saying, like, it's always good for people to have friends that maybe are different personalities than them, right? Because, that helps you expand and grow. And I always say that too with, partners. It's good to have a partner. I will say this, it's good to have a partner that is a little different than you, not super different, but I do think with a partner, it's good to have them communicate the same way, but be different in a lot of other aspects, because that's how we grow. Friends too. Friends is a little easier to have them very different, right? Because you can always always not hang out with your friend. Like, you're stuck with your spouse for at least, for the foreseeable future. So yeah, I think that's the best way is to have friends who are a little different. And because she had that friend who was super open about taking it, had totally different personality type, she wanted to try everything. So she's like, oh yeah, great. And she took 3. That gave the person almost permission to just like go, okay, I'm going to take this chance. And, once she did it, she loved it. And then it became a part of her world. So her bubble expanded. Falafel was outside the bubble and now it is inside the bubble. And I'm sure she's going to be that way her whole life, but the more you do that, the more expansive and the more that gatherer will learn to expand their own bubble without.
I remember growing up, I had 3 different types of friend groups. I had my gang member friend groups, so they sell drugs and do all the wrong things in life. And then I had my college friends, so they go to college and do college stuff. And then I had my grown and sexy group. So these people were like 10 years older than me, and I would go out to eat with them and we'll have dinner, we'd go bowling, we'd do adult activities. And just to differentiate, like me differentiating between and me also saying, you know what, I don't want to hang out with these people. I want to go hang out with the bums for a little bit. I go hang out with them. I was like, I want to hang out with the college kids. And so I was able to get a wide variety of personalities that way, or just different realms of life at different points, because I was in my 20s, in my early 20s, 21, 22. And I was doing this and I was like, this is like the best for me because I wasn't just stuck in one little world. I can see what I liked, what I didn't like, and then what I wanted to aim for in life was very simple for me, because it was like, all right, I know what I need to do. I'm going to go get it. And it's so funny because the things that I went and got, I look back and I'm like, how did I even do that? It was so challenging. But then I say, well, I just put my mind to it. And what I tell people all the time is that, you can do anything that you put your mind to, right? There's nothing impossible. It's just the things that you want to allot for yourself. Do you want to push yourself? Do you want to be in a better position than you are? Do you want to accept normal? Or do you want to look for extraordinary? And there's just so many possibilities in our life for us to settle on the $4.99 buffet, and we didn't even check out the, in Vegas and go to the Cosmopolitan. You're paying $49.99, but the food is great, right? So there's just so many opportunities, and I always encourage people to learn about themselves. And here is a mindset podcast. We talk about mindset. We talk about personalities. We talk about books. We talk about all the different things that the mind can question, or maybe what the mind can understand or learn. And I always tell people to be open, to be like that girl online who's asking about the falafel, saying, what is this? And to think about it. And then she tries it and it's like, wow, this is amazing. And that can be life. Life can be amazing. So Eric, as we begin to wrap up, I would love to get some final words, some final thoughts, and for you to please tell everyone how they can find you, get your book, and learn more about what you're doing in the world.
Yeah, well, the final thought I would say is I would 100% again in agreement that, I love the idea that we can push ourselves to whatever we want and we can achieve the things that we want to achieve, and it's all in our mindset. And, and that's why I'm such a believer in, I guess, what you tell your son, love what you fight for, because if you're going to put in that energy, you got to love it, right? Don't put all your energy and don't be trying to have because it's just going to be unhealthy for your mindset to be like, oh, I got to be super successful in this thing that I hate. And you might not necessarily know that you hate it at that moment. You might just be meh, find something you love. It's worth it, and I that's what I would say or finish off with. You can find my book, The Power of Personality, on Amazon if you want to give Jeff Bezos your money, or you can go to your local bookstore and order it through there, or Barnes & Noble if you want to go to a big box store. But basically, you can find it anywhere you buy books and order it there. And you can find me on projectutopia.com. And that's Utopia with a Y-O-U, like YouTube, because I think we get a more perfect world, not a perfect world, but we get a more perfect world when you focus on what you really are. So it's projectutopia.com. And actually, if you want to take the test to figure out what animal you are, you can go to, this is weird because it's a different site, UtopiaProject.com. And there's an assessment there where you can kind of figure out what animal. And once again, it's a cookie cutter. I always say these online tests, I designed it myself, but it's still, it's a cookie cutter test. If you really want to truly find out what animal you are and the ones that you love, shameless plug, buy the book, The Power of Personality.
We love plugs here, and I encourage people to check out the links. I'm actually going to go to his website just in a moment to see what type of personality I am, because I love to learn about myself, whether it be the shadow test, the Clifton Strength Finder test, to learn about myself because it gives me an edge. I would rather know what I'm capable of than to leave it in the dark. So I want everyone that is listening to learn more about themselves, to think about investing in themselves and look at the power of personalities as something that's going to be an investment for your future. So I do want to thank you, Eric, for coming on, spending some time, and of course, talking about your work and your book.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.